How lost is a lost episode of Doctor Who? I'm not talking about what are the chances it'll be returned. I want to know how unknowable is it. Luckily we have the camera scripts which tell us what was supposed to be seen on screen, and for some Doctor Who's we are very lucky in that we have these tele-snaps, but time and again for existing episodes we discover that what ended up on screen was not what was in the camera script. To take one random example, this shot in The Seeds of Death was not planned. Very occasionally, a new snippet of information will come to light which will reveal something that was seen on screen in a missing episode that is not preserved in the audio or in the camera script. For example, this newspaper article tells us that in the lost episode The Feast of Stephen, the woman in this scene is throwing grapes at the sheikh, something we had no idea about. And in a forthcoming episode of the Missing Episodes podcast, which I highly recommend, Tim Burrows interviewed Neil Lambus, who has vivid recollections of the power of the Daleks, and explained that in one particular scene, the Doctor and Ben try to pass each other in a corridor, repeatedly block each other's path in that little back and forth that people do, ending in a little waltz where they turn each other around. It sounds like a joy and it's completely unscripted. So over on my own personal Patreon, which is separate to the Dalek one, I am undertaking a reconstruction project where I am trying to meticulously rebuild the Highlanders as accurately as possible. So I've dipped into various scenes as new technology became available and I tried out different things. But recently I've been undertaking a lengthy chunk of the start of episode 4, the beginning of which I had more freedom with because there's no camera script to adhere to, so I just had to match the tele-snaps. But then the following scene was a simple studio scene featuring Trask, Solicitor Grey and Perkins. And although it seemed simple, there were some quite dynamic camera moves, and these are the kinds of things that pose a challenge for reconstructions. Plus, I was kind of interested in the fact that it's a very ordinary scene. It contains no special effects and no set pieces. It's not famous for any reason, but it's very much the kind of bread and butter character-based scene on which classic Doctor Who was built. And of course, to rebuild an entire episode, or indeed an entire serial, then every single scene will need addressing, whether it's exciting or not. So this exchange, which lasts 1 minute and 34 seconds, became my focus. And the most important question to answer is not just what the camera script and the tele-snaps say it looked like, but what are the hidden details? Is there anything in the audio that can reveal action in the scene that is otherwise unknown? Plus, if we're going to recreate the visual, then the other vital question to answer is, what does the room look like, which is not documented in any production photos? And ultimately, how close can we get to understanding exactly what was on screen from this missing 94 seconds? So where do we even begin with an investigation like this? Well, there are 6 tele-snaps, off-air photographs taken by a man called John Cura. Tele-snaps is a brand name for his product. To begin with, let's see if we can figure out exactly which moment each of these tele-snaps is capturing. So we need to look at the camera script and see what shots might be described. And we're going to skip the first one for now and go straight to tele-snap number 2, centre left, which is a close-up of Solicitor Grey looking slightly down on him, i.e. a high angle shot. Then we have Trask, and we're looking very slightly up at him, so that's a low angle shot. Then a big close-up of Trask. Tele-snap 5 is a 2 shot of Perkins and Trask, and it ends on Trask again. So if you're unfamiliar as to how the camera scripts are marked up, what we're being told here is that shot number 1 is on camera 2, and each camera has a series of positions that are planned out by the director, which are given a letter. So this is camera 2 position A. So this shot has all 3 characters, Grey, Perkins and Trask, and that doesn't match any of our tele-snaps, so we are skipping it for now. Shot 2 is on camera 3, position A. This is a low angle and another 3 shot, so again, no match. But shot number 3 on camera 5 in position A is a high angle, medium close-up of Grey. So that matches this tele-snap.
You sail. Fog or no fog?
Shot 4 is all 3 actors, so we discount it. Shot 5 is back on Grey, medium close-up as before, so this too could be the source of this tele-snap. Then shot 6 is camera 3 again, but now it is just a medium close-up of Trask and it is a low angle. So that must be this tele-snap. And it might be reasonable to suggest that his contorted face is him in the middle of saying the word law in either of these instances.
Law. What do the law or anyone care for those island cattle we carry?
Shot 7, back on camera 5, high angle, big close-up of Gray, so we know this zoom gets even tighter. And then back on Trask, low angle, camera 3, position A, and this is a big close-up of Trask, so that has to be this shot, which is useful as it helps us understand the difference between a mid close-up and a big close-up. So those are the simple ones to work out, but the remainder are a bit tricky. We'll start with shot 10, which is back on camera 3 that had previously just been trained on Trask, but now is apparently just a close-up of Perkins. None of the tele-snaps show us just a close-up of Perkins, but there is this shot of Perkins and Trask. However, there is no corresponding shot in the camera script of Perkins and Trask. And given that Perkins seems to be speaking here, and his only line of dialogue after the very first in the scene is here, this has to be this moment. Which means that although the camera script tells us there should be a close-up of Perkins, it was recorded as a two-shot of Perkins and Trask. And this is not uncommon, that what ends up on screen is not what was meticulously planned out in the camera script.
Oh, yes, sir, indeed you may.
So then let's look at this final shot number 11, which is on camera 2A. And the only other time that camera 2 has been used in this scene is in the opening shot. So let's look at these two together and see if we can work out what this camera position might be. So I want to start by acknowledging the help of Isabel Skinner with this little puzzle. She is currently undertaking her own amazing work on Highlanders animation, which is a follow-up to her extraordinary Wheel in Space episodes. So I've been batting ideas backwards and forwards, usually in the format of me making a stupid conjecture, and she makes a much more intelligent point, and I correct my thinking. So here we are at the beginning of the scene on camera 2, position A, and it's a very visual opening shot, which is nice. We begin with a close-up of a bottle and a glass. Trask lifts the glass and the camera elevates to produce a 3-shot of Gray, Perkins and Trask. The characters are listed logically left to right as they are on screen, so this tells us that Gray and Perkins are in the background of this shot and Trask is in the foreground on the right of picture. So we can understand that the camera begins looking down at the bottle and the glass, and then it points up to capture all 3 characters. So before we continue, there's another little detail we need to understand about the way these camera scripts are produced. The right-hand column was originally the rehearsal script, as rewritten by the story editor or script editor from the original writer's draft. So everything on the right-hand side has been rehearsed and tweaked by the actors, during which time the director was working out his camera angles and annotating the script to show where he intended to capture each shot. These annotations were then typed over the original rehearsal script into the left-hand column, creating a script of 2 halves. So in very reductive terms, what you're seeing is sort of an earlier draft on the right and the finished version on the left. And the reason it's important to mention this is because sometimes there seems to be a conflict between the 2 columns, and it must be understood that whatever's in the right-hand side is an earlier intention, and whatever's in the left-hand side is what was definitely planned for recording on the night, although even that might change. Therefore, an important point to pick up here is that the script originally says that Trask is drinking from the bottle, whereas the camera direction says he lifts the glass. So we have to begin by untangling whether this is a contradiction or whether both can be true. I was a bit bamboozled by this, and it was Skinner who I think cracked the problem. It seems that Trask was holding both these items, but drinking from the bottle and offering the glass to Solicitor Gray. So with this in mind, if we go back to the opening moments of this scene, I think we can discern the sound of liquid swilling around the bottle as Trask takes a sip. And then a second sound of a sip and the little exhale of him savouring it.
At once your signature, not before time.
So then we can make sense of the idea that he's still drinking from the bottle and offers the glass to Solicitor Gray, hence this line.
A little wine for your cold heart, lawyer?
Solicitor Gray declines, and then if you listen carefully, I think you can hear the rejected glass being put down on the table.
I never mix liquor with business. I would advise you to do the same. You sail on the morning tide, remember?
So if that's what the actors were doing in those moments, what was the camera doing? Well, if we look at the camera script, we can see that opening 3 shot of Gray, Perkins and Trask is transformed into a tighter shot with Trask having moved right out of frame, which tells us that the earliest telesnap in this scene must be taken during Gray's final couple of lines. So I think logically, if we rewind the camera direction, as it were, we will end up in a starting position for this scene. And in order to have Gray and Perkins in the distance and Trask in the foreground, then logically the shot is at the other end of the table to Solicitor Gray. So I blocked out a very rough 3D environment to play around with this setup and see if this all makes sense.
There you are, sir, all signed and attested, but wants your signature.
Not before time.
A little wine for your cold heart, lawyer?
I never mix liquor with business. I would advise you to do the same. You sail on the morning tide, remember?
But let's not forget that this scene is topped and tailed with camera 2. So, having hopefully figured out correctly how the scene begins, we can reverse engineer it to try and understand the final shot. So, it begins with a low angle mid shot of Gray, with the wine glasses in the foreground. So, if we're right in thinking that the wine glass got put down, then this means that the foreground is the wine glasses on the table. And as the next scripted direction says that Gray rises, then he obviously starts sitting down. But then he crosses forward, which I take to mean that he walks around the table, and then the camera elevates as he picks up the wine glass, and Trask comes in from the right. And working from the opening shot as a starting point, I blocked out a little 3D version like this. However, as soon as I matched it to the audio, I figured something wasn't quite right. See if you agree.
As for you, Captain, you must answer for yourself.
'Twas but in jest. You know me, solicitor.
You might have noticed a couple of things stand out. Firstly, Trask seems to be more off microphone than Solicitor Gray, which suggests that he starts further away and then comes forward. And backing this up, if you listen again, as he laughs, you can hear what sound like footsteps.
As for you, Captain, you must answer for yourself.
'Twas but in jest.
So I think what we're perceiving here is that Solicitor Gray stands up, crosses in front of the table towards the camera, and then with Trask on the back foot, metaphorically speaking, he then comes forward to try to diffuse the situation he's just created. But once Gray has crossed forward, what does he do next? Well, the original rehearsal script action for the actor says that Gray takes the bottle from Trask and pours out the remainder of the wine. But the camera direction says that the shot elevates as he picks up the wine glass. Now, as was explained, the camera direction side on the left is the more up-to-date intention. And because the left-hand side of the script makes no mention of him pouring away the glass, I was starting to think that he was just carrying it around, and I thought the intention to pour away the drink was lost. But then Is Skinner pointed out that you can hear something in the audio. Take a listen.
Is the way you will remain, Mr. Trask.
Which means that it was originally scripted that he would take Trask's bottle and pour it away, but after rehearsals it seems they decided that Solicitor Gray would pick up the glass that was left behind and defiantly pour it on the floor in front of Trask. Therefore, I think that all makes sense, and we have one final telesnap to look at, and also 4 seconds of silence. Have a listen to this.
Is the way you will remain, Mr. Trask.
Ah, that's better.
Looking at the final telesnap and the script together, we can see that this silence is explained by the camera tightening in on Trask's face, his reaction shot to the wine being poured away as he reconsiders his life choices.
I'm your man.
Aye. And that is the way you will remain, Mr. Trask.
This breakdown of the camera shots gives us a reasonably clear view of the way the scene was blocked, with a dynamic little camera move topping and tailing a series of close-ups of the actors. But there's still something very significant that we need to work out, and before we do, I'd just like to give another little plug to my Patreon. If you're interested in listening to me puzzling out these camera script problems and picking through the minute details of the tele-snaps, then you can join in my rambling journey as I explore these missing delights. But the other question we have to answer is, what does the room look like in which all this action happens? The tele-snaps that we've looked at provide very little information, apart from this one shot of the desk, which seems to have some kind of bench behind it, an item which Skinner suggests is a candlestick, and obviously paperwork and a quill in the foreground. But this isn't the only scene set in this room, so if we jump forward, when the Doctor comes to talk to Solicitor Grey later in the episode, we get this view. Now, I initially got distracted by the ghostly apparition that is overlaid into this shot, and I just couldn't quite perceive what I was looking at, and I thought maybe it was a rope or Trask or something, and then Rhys Williams pointed out that it's very clearly Patrick Troughton's face. Little echo of a lost screenshot here. In this shot of the ship's cabin, I wondered whether we were below decks, and therefore the object in the background might have been a ladder. But when I put this to Skinner, she pointed out the obvious, that it is a window. And when I went looking at similar 18th century sailing ship cabins, I saw the kind of window we're talking about at the rear of the ship, with these columns between the windows and little alcoves which are used as storage spaces. Different ships had slightly different arrangements, but this was definitely what we were looking at on the Annabelle. So we see we've got one of these pillars here and a matching one just behind Patrick Troughton, so I reasoned there's probably a third one over there. So there'll be a window there and another one there. Now, if we look at the telesnap from the previous scene, we can see that there is a column over there too, but this seems to be much more widely spaced, creating a larger one of those kinds of alcoves. I think we've got a little hint of the wooden panelling beneath the windows, and I think here we can discern what looks like a padded seat, which that candlestick is sitting on. In the other alcove, it doesn't quite look to be the same kind of cushion to me, so I wondered if it was maybe a book, but it's very hard to make out. However, if we fill this in with an extra wall on the right and then a bit of floor, and I think we can get a pretty good estimation of this lost set, something that is not represented in any studio photographs. So with that breakdown complete, I was then armed with the information to try to recreate the scene, and that's the ongoing process I'm undertaking on Patreon. But you can see just from this one unremarkable little scene that there are plenty of extra mysteries hidden in every part of every missing episode of Doctor Who.